and welcome to Choices Global, a production of First Assembly of God, Wortmanville, Georgetown, Guyana. On this program, we curate and cultivate conversations pertinent to nation building. And today, our topic will examine leadership and governance as a means of creating discourse in the corridors of power, whether it is in family, communities, or at the national level. Today, we have an awesome panel of speakers, including Marissa Messiah, an HR specialist, youth advocate, and former commissioner for the Rights of the Child Commission. We have Joel Lee, a marketing manager in the private sector with an inordinate passion for national development and influential leadership. Lemar Williams is our youth panelist, and he is a UWI Law graduate and a Caribbean personality. I wonder what that means, Lemar. And we have with us residing in Switzerland, Mr. Kurt Corbin, a security project management and administration professional, along with yours truly, Chevron Corbin, your moderator for today. Panelists, welcome. Now, we want to get into the discourse on leadership and governance, and I dare say that true leadership does not maintain followers, but produces leaders. This is a quote from Miles Monroe in his book, In Charge. And he declares or posits that everyone, everywhere, every time is always being led, whatever the condition, circumstance, or predicament, and whether that person is in a family, community, organization, or nation, someone led them there. And so, as we discuss today, let's look and examine the life of Moses and his father in law, Jethro, who would have become a mentor and would have helped him on his governance journey as a new leader leading the people of Israel. And so, Joel, I want to ask the first question or pose the first question to you. And let's lighten up. Joel, in our previous discussions, you reflected on Moses being the vision bearer. And while that is an awesome position to be in, if you're a leader or whether you've worked hard to get to that position, you really want to do well. But sometimes it comes with pitfalls, some self inflicted, and others simply because of the mammoth task ahead. Joel, let's hear your reflections on the experience of Moses and what it costs to become a leader and to deliver good governance.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And Moses is such a interesting character in the Bible and an interesting leader. He starts out first. There was a decree that a deliverer, so to speak, was going to be born, and and Pharaoh then decides to kill all the boys, and then Moses's mom puts him into a basket, and he's now he's now in Pharaoh's house, and Pharaoh more or less raises this boy as his very own. And Moses now finds himself that he was just about 40 at that time, where he kills an Egyptian, and he had those internal matters, and he subsequently ran away. And then the call of God started, with him now being the deliverer that God had promised, that will come and take the people of Israel out of Egypt. So Moses, with that assignment, we move from the burning bush to the point where he's now back in Egypt, and he's now come as this deliverer. And God, takes him through the paces in terms of what he's going to do when he goes to Pharaoh and all of that. And the long story short, Moses was successful in bringing the people of Israel out of Israel. And, he stays true to his calling in terms of making that happen. Moses now has an even more experiences, because this is people who have been in slavery for over 400 years, and bringing them out. And there comes a time in every leader's process where we have we've answered the call, and then we start to experience some level of success as we go forward. And sometimes you can start to develop, which is part of you being human, some not so good relationships with those who are following you. And Jethro, his father-in-law, comes at a time where Moses is, he's still committed to the cause of leading. And his father-in-law makes an observation that what you're doing here is not sustainable. He's seen that Moses is developing an unhealthy relationship between him and the task of leading and the followers. And he steps in and gives wise counsel to Moses to say, hey, Moses, this thing, it may be looking nice now, but it's not something that is sustainable. And the fact that he had that relationship with Moses speaks to leaders having people around us that can, one, spot those quote unquote blind spots as a leader, which all leaders have, and be able to highlight it. And most importantly, the leader having the maturity to take the constructive criticism and implement it in a way that can help them to improve their level of service. So Moses indeed is a great person for us to discuss as it relates to leadership. And we know in our local context, we have national leaders, we have leaders in their families, and there are times when we are faced with that reality where we might be consumed by our task as leaders and miss that blind spot, and we could be doing something that feels good now, but the end is quote unquote destruction. So we all have to have that level of maturity for those who are following us, and have people around us who can help us in that regard to spot where we might not be, spot the blind spots, so to speak. So this is going to be a very fruitful discussion, I'm sure. Marissa?
I like how he wrapped it up and tried to put a neat bow on it so that we could start our discussion. So kudos to you, Joel. Um, I like Simon Sinek. He posed this question about generational leadership. He said leadership is not about the next election; it's about the next generation. And I think that that is a beautiful context in which to frame our discussion, because we're not just talking about leadership, we're talking about leadership in its relation to governance. So we all have a responsibility to the next generation and to the generations that follow to be able to execute our role as leaders well, whether we are in at work, in our professional capacity, or in our religious capacity at church, or in our governmental roles as ministers of government, etc. I think we all have in our roles and our positions and our functions, we all have to keep the next generation in mind and not so focused on just gaining office. With that frame, I want to speak not just about Jethro and his connection to Moses as a familiar relation, but I want us to examine um, something that I'm something in relation to the generational leadership. No, I believe that as leaders, when you're young, there are so many different things that you have the capacity to do. You are vibrant, you're energetic, you're driven, you're active, and you are focused, and you have like a hyper focus, and you have the time to be able to dedicate all of your energies to whatever it is, whatever area it is that you're leading on. And so you find like a lot of younger persons are really willing to make sacrifices. Sometimes they sacrifice their home life or their family life. They're probably not present as they should be as a spouse and as a parent or as a sibling, or as a child. They're so focused on going out and getting everything done. And I'm highlighting these things not as flaws necessarily, but as facts. And so when you're young, it's important to be driven. And when you're mature now, you have a little bit time on and age on you, then your power of leadership extends now beyond just the action, the activity. Now you have keener sense of observation. You're able now to mentor from your wealth of experience and from your own body of knowledge in the area. So people can often misunderstand and misrepresent um, the different ages and stages of leadership. So some persons may look at the same scenario Joel referenced and say, man, Jethro should have stayed in the place because Jethro is a big man. And they had their time and now it's our time. And I think as a as a young leader, it would be a misrepresentation and a misunderstanding of Jethro's role. I will even posit that there can be no Moses if there is no Jethro. Meaning, in if you as a young person cannot humble yourself to be able to listen to the advice of somebody who's gone this way before and listen to the gems they would have learned, it would invalidate your position as leader. I will stop there and I'll invite another comment and we can continue.
So thanks, Marissa.
Limar,
I want to come back in. I really want to come back in because yourself and Joel are connecting a few things. I think, Joel, you made a point that Moses was seen as the deliverer. And when you find yourself as a leader in a position of authority, you find yourself thinking sometimes that it's your birthright or it was something placed upon you as a responsibility. It might be elder sibling, it might be the oldest or most experienced person in the company, or it might be the most experienced person in the ministry. And so, with that, your leadership role starts to become something that is more personal. And what Rissa then did, as you were signaling the pitfalls, Rissa, you then shifted it to the generational element. And I want to now posit that leadership should always be not about you, the leader, but about the people you are governing and the destination with which you intended to get to. And so I believe the experience of Moses was first bringing the people out of Egypt. They were now they were in transit, if we want to say that. But then the intent was now to get them to the promised land. And Marissa, the generational component is what would have gotten them there, because as we know, the way this account ended, Moses did not see the promised land. And so I want to buttress how important the generational aspect is. And this is where we start to shift from leadership to governance, because leadership is about me and I, and governance is now about raising up those leaders who will carry that vision. And a vision could be for your time and season, as you said. And yet you need a new person, fresh blood, to take us to the next level. And with that, we go to our youth. Limar, you have been discussing with us a book you're reading about how to stand up to the dictator. So that person who has become all about I, me, myself. So share with us your reflections on how leaders can be authoritarian, and where is that necessary and where is that not at all recommended.
Thank you so much for the question, Siobhan. And I love the initial discussions that my colleagues would have already set this with. And some things that I want to lay a prelude to actually answering the question. Um, when we look at governance, I think we should like have like a watchword or meaning. When we speak of governance, we speak of the process of making decisions and enforcing those decisions within a society. In that society, we're looking at the context of the children of, and Moses had to make decisions and enforce them as he would have received them from God for the benefit of the children of Israel. And the ultimate end goal was to get to the promise. So every decision Moses had to make in that particular context, he would have had to consult God. And what is important Moses as a leader. A leader, by definition, is someone that commands authority and influence, right? And Moses was authoritative in the sense that he was likely to be respected. And what is important for us to distinguish Moses' figure is from an authoritarian. Now, an authoritarian is someone that really and truly promotes strict obedience to authority at the expense of personal freedom. Now, that was not Moses, as we can try to transplant his leadership method into our current context. Moses was not an authoritarian, authoritative in the sense that he's likely to command respect and get the respect from the children of Israel, but he did not do that at the expense of their personal freedom. Because as we see, he took the advice of Jethro in delegating the authority to other people, but he retained the authority over the most important decisions. So what we get from that, I know Professor Lumumba once said that while he was speaking on transplanting the English system from the conceptual West to the Africa and other parts, when he talked about transplanting an oak tree. This is certainly not the case because the example of Moses is timeless and it's universal. Because what we see from Moses, he didn't get consumed. Everything, this authority, this God given authority, didn't get to his head. And it didn't allow him to move from the realm of being an authority, an authority to become an authoritarian. So he really and truly internalized it and he humbled himself. He looked at it like, okay, governance requires me to make and enforce decisions within a society for the benefit of this society. Now, what would benefit children of Israel in that context? If Moses gave other people the duty to do other things, that would be most beneficial to the children of Israel. And he was like, yeah, this makes sense for the so I'm going to stay back and I'm going to give other people to make the minor decision while I make the major decision. So that is something important for us to watch and learn from Moses.
So Limar, as I let before I let Kurt jump in, Kurt, any comments from you? But I really want to push back to say, are there times in leadership, and we have the example of the COVID pandemic. We have examples when, as a leader, you step into a new ministry, you step into a new company as the head, and there are some things you just want to push through. So, any one of you, is there a time when you need to stamp your authority? And when is that time, and how do you rebalance it with taking context or feedback from others? Kurt, Rissa,
Oh,
Joel, in
I,
that
I,
order.
want- I wanted to step in. I think if you, as a leader, do not take the opportunity to ensure that you transmit and communicate exactly what you need from the group of persons that you're responsible for, you would have missed the opportunity as a leader, and you should be sitting down and not being a leader. And I'm very serious about that. We can have a debate about it, but I think it's we are in a society now where everybody has a truth and everybody has a right, and everybody is ignoring their responsibilities. And one of the major responsibilities of a leader, let's look at the home, for example. A parent is not a friend to their child when their child is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If a parent befriends their child, then they would have lost the opportunity to be able to instill critical values and critical principles in their lives. Things that can last for generations. They would have missed that opportunity. No, I am not saying that as your child gets older and becomes an adult, the relationship changes. And then you have the opportunity to see your friend or your child is in that circle. but you do not abdicate your responsibility as a parent, because that is the first foremost priority. Let's transition that into governance now. As a leader, you have to lead from in front. You've got to lead your people. Everybody's looking up to you to be able to lead them. And that is something that cannot be shared in that moment, because you, like Joel said initially, have the vision. So we elect you to an office to serve us because you have a vision that we support. Therefore, you have to be the one to communicate your vision, and it has to be done it has to be done. I'm using Limar's words, in a very authoritative way, not being dictatorial, not being authoritarian, but being authoritative, which is completely different. That's why I love the English language and its nuances. But we are going to go forward now and see, once you understand that that's your role as a leader, then it makes things easier for you to be able to stay in the pocket with regards to ensuring that they understand what they have to do, the people. However, I will also like to posit, it is challenging for a leader in themselves to be able to sometimes regulate, self-regulate at the appropriate times. And this is where you need the Jetros. You need people in your circle to be able to help you transition. No, I'll explain the scenario like this. After you had a meeting and you are instructing, and sometimes that could be extremely intense, you might feel like you have communicated exactly what needs to be said, and how it, so that people around you can understand exactly where they need to be and what they need to be doing and how they need to be doing it. And the word we like to use culturally is expeditiously. But you need to have that trusted person or group of persons around you who are going to wait until that moment is done. And when you're aside, and you have to be humble enough to be able to say, how did things go? What's the feedback? How did everything go? And that person has to be bold enough and honest enough to say, you could have, you could have lightened up a little bit. I think you had everybody and then you lost them at this point, or you, and that person helps you know to be able to have a different perspective as a leader in how you are communicating, and that now should inform what you are doing next with with your team, or with the populace, as we're discussing governance. And it helps you know to get better at self-regulating. It's not something that we as leaders can always do, because you can be in the pocket and you can be so good at being authoritative, but you lose the people. And you may not, you seem that you're losing the will of the people, but you don't understand why you're losing it. And you need to have the jetros around you, and you need to be humble enough to listen to them. Now, was I controversial enough, or do I need to be a little bit more controversial, Siobhan?
So this was
If
controversial enough. And I think, Kurt, allow me to now frame the next question since time is going. I think building on what Rissa said, we need people around. We need people who will speak truth. And sometimes we need to discipline. And she gave the examples of when you're raising a family. Kurt, talk to us about the authentic leader or authenticity in leadership. As we frame, the experiences of Jethro, or rather Moses, and Jethro being his mentor.
can I, before I answer the question, can I say a thought that crossed my mind as Marissa was speaking? I would
Sure.
like to mention. I would like Thank you. I would like to mention the word emotional intelligence. We spoke about should we what type of leader, and it's going to come back to authentic as well. What kind of leader do we want, or should we be? And in our pre-recording discussion, we mentioned there are a whole lot of leaders out there and a whole lot of discussions, but and which one is the best? And what we realize is that sometimes you have to be a little bit of authoritarian, a little bit of democratic, and a little bit of everything, even a little bit of laissez-faire. At times you have to relax and put your hair down and so on and so forth. So, emotional intelligence. Jethro told Moses, "You will stress yourself out and stress the people out." And this is where emotional intelligence comes in. You can't think you alone have all the ideas, you alone know what to do. And in fairness, Moses thought he was doing an excellent job. He led the people, he brought them here, he was judging and he was making decisions and so on and so forth. And in some cultures, like Moses had, when there's a long line in front of you, that means you're important and you're doing a good job. But in other cultures, that is not necessarily a good thing. It is seen as it is termed as inefficiency. So which one is best? Do you want to appear? Do you want to tire the people out? It comes emotional intelligence. As leaders, we need to have emotional intelligence. So coming to the authentic leader, and right back at the example we're using, the authentic leader is not necessarily a leader who only has good things against his or her name. An authentic leader has to do with someone who is genuine, someone who is transparent in their mishaps, in their good leadership. Everything is out there. We reference David from our manual for living the Bible in our discussion. He was termed as the man after God's own heart. Yet, despite he had all of these negative things against his name, but at the end of the day, he never shied away from his negatives, and he never also tried to place more on his positives. He was transparent. What is good is good. What is bad, I repent and I move on and I never do it again. So an authentic leader for me is one who is transparent, one who has all the leadership qualities we were implying, one with emotional intelligence, one who has excellent delegation abilities, one who allows independent thinking, one, as Jethro shared with his son-in-law, this work will kill you out. You alone cannot do it. So you delegate, and you delegate to a person to the level of their capability. If they can only manage 10, you delegate 10. If they can only manage 20, you delegate 20 persons to them, and so on and so forth. So an authentic leader understands that he alone does not know everything. He has a blind spot. And this is where the advisors come in. And you listen and you act. That is an authentic leader for me, Siobhan.
Wow, Joel, at this point, I give you 1 minute. Any reactions to what Kurt and Marissa were sharing on?
Well, the heart of the matter as it relates to leadership is not position, but rather influence. And any authentic leader has considerable influence, and influence to a point where people are not intimidated to say, "Sir, you missed the spot," or "This might not have been the best way to approach it." And in order for national leaders, particularly because in the society in which we live, where we're quote unquote been programmed to think within election cycles, leadership is beyond that. And in order for us to move past that, we have to start to think like that, because your influence, even though you might not hold it, it's not based upon your office. It is influence. So your influence goes beyond your time serving at a national level. And we must, and once we start to develop that understanding, it will also influence our actions. And like Marissa alluded to earlier, in terms of generationally, we don't want, after we've left the scene, that things go backward, but things must go forward, because Moses, who is our case that we're studying, Moses' influence had a significant influence on Joshua. And Joshua looked at Moses, and Joshua was able to do exploits in the promised land. Over 31 kings he killed, in terms of his just following as what Moses told him. He just followed and had that success. So any leader that is worth his salt must think beyond him. And there are times when we want to, It's all easy for us to just, get the box score, but it puts us in a better position as an authentic leader when we embrace our vulnerabilities and know that we're not perfect, but there are people who are in our circle that can bring the necessary leadership that we might also need as a leader in order for us to continue to be effective.
Wow. Well, I think time is almost on us, and I will ask each of you to give me 1 minute reflections on your key leadership principle that you would want to leave with the viewers. But as we wrap up, I'm hearing from you, Joel, that leadership is about influence. And I want to posit that in addition to influence, it's impact, meaning that we achieve something that we wanted to do together. And we can only do that if there's another I, and that is inclusivity. And I believe that as we examined Moses, we saw him dividing by the tribes. So that was now including everyone, getting different perspectives, so that any problem we had would not be looked at by one particular view or vision or perspective or experience, but from a multiplicity. And I believe that's where solutions start to be birthed. Now, I want to frame to our viewers that we all want to be leaders. If you want to be a follower, that's also okay. But we all want to be leaders. Yet we have a leadership dilemma. We still have poverty. We still have famine. We have countries that are wealthy, or they have wealth, yet they are not wealthy. We still have major healthcare issues despite advances in technology and science. And even in our families, we have the example, the good book, the Bible, and yet families are struggling to stay afloat. Families are struggling with relationships. And so I want to ask us, do we really have leaders, or do we have a leadership deficit? And this is what Choices Global is about. It's about bringing a platform or creating a platform where we can examine these modern day problems and challenge you, our viewers, to bring influence, to bring impact, and to bring inclusivity in what we're doing. So, panelists, each of you, 1 minute. What are the leadership lessons or principles you would want to leave with us? Limar, Kurt, Marissa, and then Joel.
Thank you, Siobhan. Endorsing what Marissa, Kurt, and Joel would have said, I think when a leader is faced with major, overwhelming adversity, then you can really and truly see that person be a, because in moment when you need a strong single decision for the benefit of the entire populace. And so as a leader, it's okay to be and to delegate and to always remember your source and who you serve, the people. So just keep that watchwords and your watch principles, and you will definitely succeed as a leader.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Kurt?
Thank you. Thank you, Siobhan. I would keep it short. For me, what I would like to see, I would like to see leaders give confidence to their subordinates and to the people that they're leading, beginning from the home I'm talking about. We empower our children, we empower our subordinates in the halls of power, and we empower the citizens. We must trust them to give us advice. If we are elected, if we are appointed, if we are placed in that position to lead, the position to lead does not give you the right to impose. I would like to see us give more, as leaders, give more confidence to the people that we have beneath us and trust them more. I would keep it short like that.
Awesome. Marissa?
I would like to remind us that as leaders, we have a responsibility to govern, and that even though the buck stops at us and we have that responsibility, the only way we can successfully do it is if our mindset is a mindset of humility, and we engage persons and have as much diverse opinions and diverse perspectives, so that we will be able, that should be able to help us make the decisions that we make. And we can't see each other as being competitors. This is something for the greater good of the next generation. And so you have to be humble enough to be able to just do your job for the next generation. So those are my comments there.
Joel, you have the last word.
Well, leadership in my heart is really and truly everyone who follows a leader sees themselves in that leader. And they're looking at them for inspiration. They're looking for them to ultimately bring that leader that they see out of them. So we have to be conscious of the fact that we all want to be Superman, but most, if not all of us, are Clark Kent. And with that understanding, there are times when we will get it right, and there's times we will not get it right. But we, as leaders, we must have the maturity to understand that because we're flawed doesn't mean that we can no longer be effective. Actually, it helps us in terms of our authenticity as a leader to say, here, yes, I do have a flaw, but that doesn't disqualify me, but rather gives me a real relationship with those who look at me and see the good in me to still push forward and make whatever we are working towards happen.
Awesome. Well, our time is gone, and I want to thank you, our panelists, for such a lively discussion. To our audience, I started off by reminding us of a quote by Miles Monroe that says, "True leaders do not develop followers, but develop other leaders." As our time has gone, I want to thank you again for joining the conversation. These conversations, we hope, will shape the destiny of our nations and the entities where you lead and live. To our viewers, thank you again for joining this episode. Please keep in touch with us at faogw.org and our YouTube channel, Choices Global. Join us again on the 30th of April for another episode at 5 p.m. I am Chevon Corbin, your moderator for today, encouraging you to remain grounded and leading well. This is Choices Global.